We are focused at AppSec AI on enabling companies to fix application vulnerabilities instantly and automatically at portfolio scale. And here's why that's exciting. Here's why it's exciting for businesses, not just for practitioners. First of all, we are transforming the economics of remediation. And you're like, okay, well, that's it. Maybe that sounds boring to some people, but thousands and thousands of dollars and days and months are being spent on this today. And we are going to be able to enable it to be done for cents, pennies on the dollar, and literally in minutes before people can fix a vulnerability and then go to deployment. And why is that helpful? Deploying software faster? Well, if you're deploying software faster, you're getting to revenue faster. So speed to deployment is going to equal speed to revenue. And that's really the ultimate business goal.
Today's guest is Lori Harmon. Lori is the co-founder and head of sales at AppSec AI. Lori, it's wonderful to have you today. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Well, thanks, Kirsten. Thank you for having me on Closing Code. Really appreciate being here. I'm excited about our interview today. So I've spent the last 25 years helping technology companies scale basically through sales leadership. I literally wrote the book on it, 42 Rules for Building a High Velocity Inside Sales Team. Now, this was done after pioneering a lot of how the tech industry embraced inside sales when they thought it was telemarketing. So granted, it dates me a little bit, but it really was an exciting time, and we've evolved so much since then. And since then, I've had the privilege of leading sales organizations at some really incredible companies. For example, at NetApp, I oversaw $1 billion P&L. And also I was at Cloudflare doing a really hyper growth phase, leading a business development team at BlackBerry, and also at Contrast Security. And that's just to name a few. And Contrast was really particularly rewarding because as it grew over time, it became a $1.5 billion unicorn in the application security space. And that is something that led me to co-found AppSec AI. So if you talk a little bit about AppSec AI, we are solving one of the biggest pain points in application security. And that is enabling application security practitioners to leverage AI-powered automation in a job that has largely been very manual. And that's just going to help them be more strategic. It has nothing to do with, we need less practitioners, because we don't. They're always behind, I think, because there's so much code with so many vulnerabilities. And basically, the founders and I, we are the same team that built Contrast Security. So that's kind of the link there. We are focused at AppSec AI on enabling companies to fix application vulnerabilities instantly and automatically at portfolio scale. And here's why that's exciting. Here's why it's exciting for businesses, not just for practitioners. First of all, we are transforming the economics of remediation. And you're like, okay, well, that's it. Maybe that sounds boring to some people, but thousands and thousands of dollars and days and months are being spent on this today. And we are going to be able to enable it to be done for cents, pennies on the dollar, and literally in minutes before people can fix a vulnerability and then go to deployment. And why is that helpful? Deploying software faster? Well, if you're deploying software faster, you're getting to revenue faster. So speed to deployment is going to equal speed to revenue. And that's really the ultimate business goal.
That's huge. Yes. I mean, time to market, speed to market is very important. And I think a lot of people that are not on the development side, they're just on like the end user side, they might take that for granted, like how much time it can take to actually get products up and live and get them to the point where they're usable.
Mm-hmm.
And what you just described actually is kind of a new area for me. I'm not super familiar with it. So what are some of the things, what are some of the hurdles that practitioners come across that AppSec can solve for?
Well, what happens today is most developers are not necessarily educated in how to do secure code development. So they write their code, they're great at that. But then there's vulnerabilities. And how are those uncovered? Well, there's a bunch of different tools, but in many companies, they use what's called SAST, or to translate that from an acronym, it's Secure Application Development Testing. So SAST. And what happens with those tools is what they come out with is about 40 to 50% is just noise. It's what's called false positives. So the first thing we do with that is we run it through our system and we give you a 97% accurate what's called triage. So we remove the false positives, leave the true positives in. So it's 97% accurate. So first of all, the people who really know security, which are the application security people, they are now focused only on positive or true positives, right? And then they can take those and they can prioritize. Oh, this is really serious. We need the developer to fix it. Or maybe this is less serious, right? And then the remediation product that we have will give them suggested remediation to those true positives in a way that they code. So for example, when we were testing this, we were testing with the user and we were giving them the remediation, but it didn't have their comments. So we had to adjust, right? So we can do it in the way they code, because every company has a way that they write code. And so then you can go back to the developer with credibility as an application security practitioner. You can say, hey, this is what I think you need to do to fix it. The developer can say yes or no, and then boom, you can hit a button, or the developer can hit a button, and it's automatically fixed within the code. Whereas today, they have to go back and say, hey, here's the vulnerability, and then there's all this figuring out of how to fix it, and if you go back with a false positive, you lose credibility, and that relationship can be strained if you're not going back and giving them really credible things that they need to fix, and an easy way to do that.
Yeah, makes sense. When it comes to the different types of companies or even sectors within software that you're selling into, what do those groups like?
Okay, well, everybody in security, they all sell to CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers. So that's like the top, level. But being that we're focused on application security practitioners and leaders, that's really going to be our sweet spot. But the other opportunity for us is companies that do security consulting. So our product, because they have to go through all the manual stuff that AppSec people in a company are going through. So if they can be more efficient in what they're doing as consultants, they can be more profitable. And finally, companies that do outsource software development, because they can't give their customers software that has vulnerabilities, right? So they still have to go through a similar process. So those are really where we're focused on. And we can do it in any industry, but industries that typically adopt security faster are things like financial services, healthcare, e-commerce. So those would be the typical target market. Many security products are actually focused on the developers, but we have a very clear mission that we're focused on application security.
Very interesting. When you think of your first few customers that you brought on at AppSec, what was that process like? How did you get your foot in the door? Partnerships, referrals, or was it, the traditional like cold outbound kind of like email, LinkedIn messages?
Well, I think all startups, you have to start with your network. Really, that's where you have to start as a startup. So luckily, because the other founders and I have been in security or application security for many years, we do have connections that have helped us to get our initial users and initial quotes and references and things like that. And we've also been doing a lot of experimentation. I think anytime there's a new industry, and in this case, it's the AI wave, right? It really has an impact on how people sell. It can turn sales on its head. So every time you're in a new industry, you have to reevaluate what's going to work. The other thing that's happening from a go-to-market strategy is now they have AI SDRs, right? So AI is affecting everything. And potential buyers are getting overwhelmed between regular SDRs, emailing, calling, LinkedIn, AI SDRs on steroids, email, maybe not calling yet, sending LinkedIn messages. So how do you break through all that noise? Because I look at myself, in my last big corporate job, I was hitting delete, like delete, 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 unless it was some amazingly targeted, perfect message for what a problem I had right at that moment. And that's what everybody else is doing. So we're doing a lot of experimentation on what's the best way to get into the market. We have done a couple of events where we've met people, and that's led to having users. But the other part of what we're doing, which may be unique to some startups, is we didn't race out to get VC funding. We decided to start bootstrapped because we had more control, and we really wanted to build a flexible platform that could be independent of the LLMs, the SaaS tools that I mentioned before, not necessarily independent of languages, but allow us to add languages more easily. When I say language, I don't mean, Spanish. I mean coding languages like Java, Python, Rust, you name it. So we really wanted to have the platform built. And if we'd gone out to get funding, they might just pile a sales number on us before we were really ready.
Yeah.
So by having them more control, by being bootstrapped, we were able to do that. And so I think that's another unique thing about what we've done. And then we experimented with the platform. So with development, we're experimenting, with marketing, we're experimenting, with sales, we're experimenting to get to what is really going to work. I'm not sure if there really is a silver bullet in today's environment in terms of getting through. So we're having to try a bunch of different things.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the space is like LinkedIn is a very crowded place. Inboxes are always full with messages from people, and I think a lot of there are so many startups now, and they have lean teams and they need to leverage AI and automation, but it's overwhelming. So I think events, a lot of people are turning to events now, which is I think super interesting. Someone I talked to earlier today said people tell me I'm going back 20 years, but she's like, events work for us. We try to find smaller, more intimate events where we can get like the contact list ahead of time and start reaching out that way. And it works. So it's interesting to hear that. But on the other side, like I've heard some people that are absolutely crushing it with AI automation tools. They're using like custom models and intent data to like personalize messages at scale. And you're still sending a lot of emails and a lot of messages, but the reply rate, because the reply rate has increased because the data is better. Have you looked at or tried any of those tools?
Well, the other great thing about starting a company, now and being an AI company is we are an AI first company. So we're using AI in development, we're using it in marketing, and we're using it in sales. And so I do, first of all, I agree with your event comment. I think intimate events that are with your target market make a lot of sense. And I think you're right about those tools, but you got to think about intent data. A lot of the intent data sometimes comes from people visiting your website. So depending on who you talk to and what kind of brand recognition they had, nobody knows our brand yet. We just launched in February. So we've been working, we intentionally did that in February ahead of our remediation release so we could start building our brand. And so, yes, you can look at some of that. And we're trying a bunch of different sales tools. In fact, we probably have more than I can even list. But we have some of the traditional ones like HubSpot, for a CRM. Most small companies have that, but they're, of course, adding AI functionality. We've tried Apollo. We've tried some LinkedIn prospecting tools. We have video tools like HeyGen and Vidyard. And we're looking at some of the more like AI-based tools that you're talking about. We have our own customized LLM that we use that's programmed with our data, of course, and then we still use other LLMs to get information. So I would say, we're trying a lot of things. We're still experimenting to get the right mix, but I do agree that if you have a very personalized message and it's spot on, combined with the intent information that you're able to gather, that is something that should resonate with potential prospects.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. It's kind of funny. There's either people that are like maybe over adopting some of the AI tools, like they have a lot, like to your point, like maybe too many to mention, and then some people that are like, I'm not really touching that right now for whatever reason. I'm not really finding many people in the middle. But it sounds like you might be kind of that one outlier that's like kind of like dabbling between both spaces.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, we're trying a lot of things, and some
Yeah.
things we don't keep, right? We try them, and then they don't work, so we get rid of them. Or, hey, this seems to be working. We're going to keep going with it. And we
Yeah.
do, again, we have the flexibility because we're just now getting to where we have some outside funding or more outside funding versus having VC funding. And I just think it's the right thing to do because if you bet too big on one thing and it doesn't work, and then you burn through whatever cash you have or your bootstrap cash, that's a bad problem, right? Because then you're out of runway.
Yeah. Yeah. When you think about testing different ICPs and outreach strategies, not necessarily at AppSec, but like throughout your career, when do you decide to like give up on an ICP to say like that one's not for us? We need to focus and double down on this one or maybe a secondary one. What does that look like for you historically?
Well, I do think it depends on what you're selling, right, and how long the sales cycle might be. But it's not something you can do in a week or a couple weeks. This is going to take months because what if you're going after a new ICP and they might know like the company, but maybe they don't know you have a product. Like, for example, I've been at companies where they were known for something and then they expanded on what their space was. And so people were like, well, oh, don't you do this? We're like, well, no, we do this too now. Like we've added this thing. And so until you can establish your brand in a new segment, that could take quite a while. So it could be months, it could be a year before you really know if you're maybe even longer, depending on how slow the market you're going after moves, to really get people to know who you are. Hey, by the way, we have this this thing now that solves one of the problems you have, and then get their interest, and then get them through a sales cycle. So I do think it varies based on what you're selling and what the company is and who your ICP is. But patience is really important. People can't, oh yeah, in 2 weeks you need to do this. You're not going to do it in 2 weeks. So not only do you have to have patience, the people maybe above you, your executives have to understand you got to have patience to get this done.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. Very well said. I think a lot of executives and people that are selling or in that selling seat, they're extremely impatient. And I think that's also kind of a good thing because it's like if it's not working here, I'm going to go find a way to like make something else work. Or even at the lowest level, like if you're an SDR and you're trying to book meetings, just if you can't get enough meetings booked, just pick up the phone and keep calling, like make it happen.
You can't always make it happen.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is, what if, just as a sort of a different approach to what you're saying, what if you have a new product and you actually go after an ICP and you get meetings, and then it turns out the product maybe doesn't have the functionality you needed. Maybe it was too early on the product. So the ICP was right, sales gets through, and then, oh, wow, we weren't ready for prime time. So I think there's that side of it too, because sometimes companies may believe, or executives or engineering may believe you're more ready than you are when you actually get out and you talk to a customer or a potential customer. They're like, oh no, we need these 5 other things before we'll even consider you. And you're like, oh, we didn't think those features were important for the first release for some reason. So I think that's the other side of the coin.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. I want to go back a little bit actually to your background because it's you have this amazing background. You've been at these great tech companies, but I'm always curious how people end up in sales. I feel like everyone kind of has their story. So I'm curious to hear yours.
Oh, well, thanks for asking. And that's kind of funny because in the past, like when I was graduating from school, they didn't have sales degrees. They do have that now to quite a number of places. I actually thought so I was in high school, I mean, I'm going way back. In high school, I took my first computer class. I said, oh my God, computers are going to be hot. I've got to go into computer science. I want to be a programmer. So when I went to school, I did major in information systems. I was planning on being a programmer. And fortunately for me, I was able to do an internship at IBM, and I did 2 of them. And on my second one, they said, we think you might be too social for this role. Why don't you go up to San Francisco and interview with the sales organization? So I did, and I actually interned in California, my second one. And so I went up there and I did the interview process and I got offered a job. And the other goal that I had set for myself when I graduated from high school was to go to work for IBM, because at the time they were very iconic and they were very big in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where I'm originally from. So, hey, I had an offer from IBM. It was in sales. Didn't really know exactly what that meant, but I took it. So I was a systems engineer, that part of sales initially. And, fast forward, I've done a few other things like customer support and professional services, but I fell in love with sales and I really never looked back. So yes, it was a weird way to get into sales, but I think a lot of people, since there was no major in sales back then, they just came from all these different backgrounds. So I was lucky that particular manager realized that maybe I was a better fit somewhere else.
That's great. And I think it's so cool when people have stories where managers are like, you might have this talent or skill that I think would be better somewhere else, and they help you pursue that. I don't hear that too often. So when I do, it always makes me happy to hear. But I'm also wondering too, since you've, grown your career and you've climbed the corporate ladder, so to speak, what are some of the habits and patterns that you either habits you identified within yourself that have helped you be successful from role to role? And what are some of the different patterns that you've created to help you become successful in each new role that you move into?
Well, I think in general, and just in sales and actually any level, you have to have grit and resilience, number one, because there's so much rejection, right? You're rejected by potential prospects. Maybe you're rejected in an interview process. Maybe you're rejected for a promotion. And that happens to everybody in every role, granted. But really, grit and resilience are key. You have to have good communication skills and be very articulate and understand like who you're talking to. Read the room, read the audience, read the person. Because if maybe somebody really does want you to go into excruciating detail, and salespeople may be more like, not as they are detail oriented, but they may just want to kind of cover the high level things. So you've got to realize who you're talking to, and do they want you to go into a lot of detail, or do they want you to keep it high level? I think those things are important, and you have to be a good listener. Salespeople should not be talking most of the time, right? They should be listening most of the time, listening for what's important and responding, as I said, at the right level to the people you're talking to. So becoming a good listener is also a huge thing. And just drive. I think I just happen to be a very driven person, and you've really got to push yourself. If you're in leadership, you've got to push your team, not to the breaking point, but you got to give them a little push, because you're just not going to go up the ladder or move anywhere if you are not driven to get there. And you've got to learn, okay, what does this leader want? What does the CEO want? What does this company want? How do I fit into this culture? And you have to be driven to go figure out all those things and then make them happen. You may have to, there's a lot of self-reflection and transformation that goes along with that.
Yeah, there is. And as you shift from corporate world more into like being an entrepreneur, how much of those skills translate, and what new skills do you think you have to adopt as a entrepreneur?
Well, definitely think the grit, resilience, and drive really are important. I'm fortunate with my co-founders because not only did I work with them, there's four of us, but I worked with two of them at Contrast Security and the same two at Network General, which was, well, very early in my career. I won't say how early. And so there's 30 years that we've known each other. So there's uber trust factor. And so the sort of the culture and working with them is, I don't really have to figure that out, which is nice. There's not that part of it, since we know each other and we trust each other. But you have to get up every morning and you have to say, I've got to go and I've got to do prospecting. I've got to figure out a new technique. I've got to test a new tool. You still got to be driven to get up and do that, especially when you're in a startup. And this is my third startup now. I ran into somebody I worked with the other day and they said, well, you're not going to do another big corporate job. You could. I'm like, I know, but I wanted to make a change, and it sounds crazy, but have a little bit more flexibility, which I know it's hard in a startup, but when you're bootstrapped, you have a little bit more control of what you're doing and how many hours or things like that you're working.
Yeah. Yeah, more freedom and flexibility, I think it
Mm-hmm.
is key. Well, Lori, last question for you. And when you're thinking about where you want to be in the next 6 to 12 months, what are some of the goals that you're focused on from a business development and sales standpoint?
Well, our number one focus really is getting more users, right? In February, I mentioned we launched the company and our first product, and now we're at our remediation product. So the key is to get users for that product, because in security, it's all about trust. And so just because you have a remediation product and just because it works and you have a lot of proof doesn't mean they're going to believe you. You have to build the trust with the users and with the clients, so they trust that when they hit the button to say, I'm going to remediate this piece of code, it actually does work. That's not going to be taken lightly, and that's going to take quite a bit of time. So number one, get users, and then get those users to become customers. Paying customers, of course. So those are really the two goals for the next 6 to 12 months. And of course, there's that figuring out what's the best go-to-market playbook to get those. Some of that will still be our network. And then those quotes and those references will help us get to other people. And we're actually working today on our overall higher level marketing and sales plan on how we're going to put that playbook together.
That's awesome. You've got a lot on your plate, a lot going on.
It's fun. That's all I can say, especially when you're working with people you know and trust, and you've had fun working with them before. It's fun. And I really, when you believe in what you're doing and you believe in the solution, how you can help people to be freer at their jobs. Because if you're doing less manual work as an AppSec person, you could be more strategic. I mean, that is awesome. That's really freeing. It helps them in their careers.
Yeah, well said. Well, if anyone wants to learn more about you, about AppSec, how can they get in touch?
Well, certainly you can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. You can direct message me. That's probably the best way. If you schedule, like on our website, when you're scheduling things, you're typically scheduling with me. So that's another thing. It's called appsecai.io. So those are two ways to get in touch with me.
Well, hopefully someone will reach out to you, and it'd be great if you can get a customer out of this.
It would be great. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you today, Kirsten.
Likewise, likewise. All right, thank you, and bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.